Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on marine engine rebuilding tips and info, part 2. I am Amanda Goyette. I'm an admin assistant with AERA, and I will be working behind the scenes, helping you with any problems you're having, answering questions, along with my colleague, Rob Monroe.
Hey everyone, Rob Monroe here. I look after membership and technical development at AERA, and like Amanda mentioned, we're both going to be in the background for today's webinar, taking in any questions you've got. Chris has lots of really good information to share, and this is stuff you just don't see in a textbook or a manual. This is stuff that Chris has been gathering for over 30 years, and really, really good information. AERA is going to have our first Tech and Skills Conference on June 7th, and it's going to be in Piney Flats, Tennessee. This is hosted by the AAM Group, Engine Pro, and Straub Technologies. So there's going to be a technical program that'll run during the day. There's lunch. There's also an NHRA drag race that's in town that weekend. So if you're making plans to go over to that part of town, do check out that NHRA drag race. That'll be there. So get registered for that one. You want to make plans. It's going to be really, really good. If you want more information on that, you can just go to our website. Once you get there, we've got a large tab right there on the website that says regional conferences. You can go right there to get registered. So look forward to seeing everybody there. Like I say, first one of the year, so be really well attended, and we look forward to having everybody there for that one. All right, well, let's get on with today's presentation. Now, Chris Hamann is the president of Lakeland Auto Marine in Port Clinton, Ohio, and he's definitely our resident expert in all things related to marine. He's the guy that we call on the tech line. Whenever you have a marine question, it's always Chris that we run it by. And like I said earlier, this kind of information that we're sharing with you just can't be found in a manual. This is all stuff that Chris has been working on and gathering for over 30 years. So this is all based on experience, some of his issues that he's run across. And basically today's presentation, he's just trying to make life a little bit easier for you if you're going to start working on marine engines, and kind of tell you a few little tips and tricks to not only save you time, but save you some grief down the road. So if anybody wants a copy of today's presentation, we will send it to you. So just let us know in the questions box, and just say that you want a copy of it, and we'll make sure to get that over to you. So Chris, how are things going today?
Excellent, Rob. Thank you. My name is Chris Hamann. I am the president, owner, whatever you want to call me, of Lakeland Auto Marine. This is part 2. If you saw part 1, great. Well, if not, you're stuck with part 2 with me again. So I just want to go over a couple things. We're going to go ahead and get this flipping here. All right. This is just a little bio on me again. I'm not going to read every bit of this. I'm 34 years doing this here at the shop. We've been an AERA member for a long time. So I have some marine experience and some auto repair experience and some diagnostic experience. This is my email right down here. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me directly. Send me an email. This is our website, and we have a YouTube channel. And a lot of the stuff we talk about, I actually have put on YouTube to try to save people some time. So you can check that out, like and subscribe, or whatever you want to do. This is some training we provide over at eHovie Career Center. Most of it is diagnostic based, using lab scopes and scan tools. We like the Pico scope. So we just actually submitted some more classes this year. We're going to talk about cooling systems, even carburetors, and all kinds of stuff instead of just fuel injection. And we're trying to get some more outboards in there. Most of the stuff we're talking about today, in fact, all the stuff we're talking about today is going to be IO and inboard. So there's going to be no outboard discussion. So, but that's the bulk of my experience is that. But here's my goals and objectives. I want to finish up where we left off on Big Block GM. We're going to talk about 8.1s. I've got some Chrysler V8 stuff in here. I know it's older. 1991 is the last year of Chrysler V8s in boats. So we're going to talk about LSs. All right, just an overview. I'm just starting to see them in our shop. Crusader was the first to use them in 2004. So and Volvo Penta, you started using them in 2000, I think 13 or 14. And Marine Power has used them in some airboat applications. Mercury Marine, Mercruiser does not use LS. They have never marinized an LS engine. So they use 350s till the end of 350s, and they develop their own engines, which we're going to talk about. So talk about some cooling system diagnostics, water in the oil, water in the cylinders. I know that's a pet peeve. It's a pain. I'm going to talk about how I do a sea trial. It's very important. I will tell you right now that if I or somebody I trust does not go on the sea trial the first time, there's absolutely no warranty. None, zero. Okay. This is the most important part of the job. I could be the best engine builder in the world. I could have the best equipment. I could have, you name it. Okay. But if this sea trial is not performed and done right and we don't check it, everything is wasted. Trust me. We'll talk about some tips and tricks, and we're going to talk about what I see, some machine shop mistakes and some installer mistakes. There's more of this, all right, than anything. So just to let you know. It's funny. Last time we had a webinar on part one, folks at FelPro reached out to me right after the webinar was done, and because we discussed some gaskets and stuff. And again, this is not a commercial. I don't want anybody to think that I'm getting paid or anything. Anything I talk about here today is stuff that I use. Okay, and if it happens to be a specific brand, I'm going to name it. Okay, but one of the things I had questions about and concerns was the catalog. Okay, the catalog hasn't been updated since I think 2012 or 13, something like that. And these guys were very proactive. They called out, they reached out. We had a bunch of virtual meetings, and they're actually getting all this stuff updated. I gave them a ton of information, stuff I've seen. They're going to put LS motors, everything in there. So, but what I want to do is, since there's going to be no more paper catalogs, you got to go to the Driv Parts website, click on engine, and then you got to click heavy duty industrial. And then you can click this drop down menu. You can select Mercury, Chris Craft, Chrysler, Volvo, Penna, whatever. And they're also going to update their seal power too. So I expect in the coming weeks, months, or whatever, that this is going to fill up and get more current for you guys. So I just want to mention that. So hats off to those guys for reaching out and working with us. And I enjoyed every minute of it. So let's jump right in where we left off. This is a one-piece rear main seal big block Chevy. So Mercury Marine, Mercruiser, never made a big block Gen 5, Gen 6. Okay, right hand rotation. All right, Crusader did, PCM and Marine Power did. Okay, PCM is Pleasure Craft Marine, which is the parent company of Crusader. So when I'll refer to stuff today as PCM, Crusader. They're basically the same company. PCM is mostly in ski boats and wakeboard boats, that kind of stuff. Crusader is their pleasure boat line, found in Tierras, Carolina Classics, that type of stuff. Other boats too, Silverton, those come to mind. Marine Power is down in Louisiana. They did these, okay? But this seal, FelPro, to my knowledge, doesn't make. So I put some numbers down here, okay? And these are Crusader numbers. You can Google them. Marysville Marine is a good spot, marysvillemarine.com. I've got a slide on them coming up later. They can help you with this, okay? If not, your local dealer, all right? If you've got a local, there kind of really isn't any Crusader dealers anymore. We were one years ago, but if you're not a boat seller, if you're not selling boats, these manufacturers aren't giving dealers out anymore. So just to give you a heads up. So, but I just want this out here because the problem is you might get one of these in your shop and, hey, what about this seal? And it does not have serrations. If I put the FelPro or Victor or whoever's seal in from a car and it's an opposite rotation, I'll have a leak if I don't use this seal, okay? The big block front seal is bidirectional, but I just want to put that out there. This is a bulletin AERA created here, just not actually pretty recently, and it's got to do with these oil bypass valves. And I do want to spend a moment on this because there is a ton of confusion when it comes to these valves, all right? And I know from the folks at AERA that they get calls on this all the time. I mean, this is almost a daily occurrence, it seems like sometimes. But I'm not going to read this bulletin to you, but I want to make a couple points, all right? These are the GM numbers for those valves, all right? There was a 30 PSI valve and a 15 PSI valve. I do believe Pioneer makes this valve or offers it. I've been buying them from my local Chevy dealer. That's where I've been getting them from. So, but I only use the 30 PSI valves. And this is a picture. So when I say number 1, number 2, number 3, 4, 5, so and so forth, you know exactly what I'm talking about. 5 is the oil in, 3 is a bypass. So here's what I'm talking about. So this is a big block Chevy Gen 5, Gen 6 oil diagram. And a couple things I want to talk about. So number one, you've probably seen these plugs, okay, in the front, and they're only on these 2 lifter galleys, all right, or excuse me, the lifter galleys. The Gen 5, Gen 6 engine has a priority main oiling system where the oil comes down through here, okay? This one does not get the vented plug. Now, I know there's a couple theories on why they use a vented plug. I believe, this is just a Chris's opinion, that vented plug is there to get air out of that lifter galley. So when the engine starts up, you know, I could have some air pockets and stuff in there. Obviously, the other theory is lubricating the timing chain or timing gears. So, but I think it's there mostly for air. That's a Chris's opinion. And I stole this diagram off a GM service manual to show you that right here, most of these engines are plugged. So Crusader, Volvo Penta, and Marine and Mercruiser. All right, those are the big three. On the Gen 4, or excuse me, Gen 5, Gen 6 engines, I have never seen them use the factory GM oil cooler lines. Okay, in a car, this would have went to the radiator with those two aluminum lines that always leak. You know, if you're a car guy, this restrictor is not in a marine engine. So I have a thought here, or excuse me, this is exactly what I do. And one of the things I do, well, before I get there, I'm sorry. I just want to show where these lines actually, or where these passages go. You can see here, this is out, okay, and it actually crosses the in. This is oil in, okay, this is oil going into the motor. I think we all realize that oil flows to the outside of the filter and then comes up through the in from the center, okay. But you can see all these cross. So my point here is, if I make a mistake and I put a 15 psi valve in, or a 30, do I use 2? Do I use 1? In my opinion, it doesn't matter. Okay, if you put the wrong valves in or anything, I don't think it's not going to hurt you. Is it maybe the most efficient way? No, but you're not going to get killed, in my opinion. So this is just what's going on. This is oil in, this is oil through here, that's oil out, and you can see both these tie into the same galley. You know, so both these strings go through. So that's what I'm saying. This guy right here, this is just basically if I have a restricted oil filter. If I have a restricted oil filter, that's going to open up and at least bypass some through. All right, that's number one. And this other one I'll show you here is used for an oil cooler. So this is my cheat sheet. I made this up. This is what I do. And basically on Merc, Volvo, Crusader, Marine Power, they all use a factory oil adapter that uses the lines off of where a normal oil filter would go. They don't use those block holes like I was talking about, this 1 and 2. Those are blocked off on every Gen 4 marine engine that I've personally seen. There might be something out there I haven't seen, but in my world, I don't see that. But what I basically do is I use a 30 psi valve. All right, the factory engines would have had 15 if it was in a car. This was a 1996 to 2000 VIN J454. This would have been, it would have had a 15 psi valve. But my opinion is I use a 30, all right, and I just put the 30 in position number 3. And the reason I do that is, you know, in a boat, we use a lot thicker oil, okay? We're not using 5, at least you shouldn't be using 530, right? You should be using, and we're not, this is not an oil discussion, okay? And trust me, everybody's got their own opinion. You know, Mercury says 2540, Volvo Penta says synthetic 30 weight that they offer. Crusader says 1540 in some applications, if not straight 40. Most of the 454 stuff and 502 stuff I've seen is straight 40. So that's a lot thicker oil. So normally what I do is I'm just putting a 30 psi valve in position 3, right? And that is in case there's some kind of restriction, I'm getting oil through. I leave 4 wide open, all right? Because if I put a valve in 4, I'm just going to jump. Oops, sorry. It's going to have multiple 90-degree angles. All right. So basically, sorry, this is where I wanted to show you. If I put a valve here, the oil's got to come up through here, come up here, turn right, turn right. You see all these turns it's got to make? Well, if I leave this valve out, that oil goes right up through and out the door because these guys are plugged. If I put a valve here, I have to, it's forcing it over through here, see? So they claim it can reduce some oil pressure. Again, if I have a valve in there, is it the end of the world? No. I take apart a lot of engines that have valves in both spots. Okay, so and the engines weren't starved of oil. So I guess it's just like a best practices, more or less. This happens to be a Volvo Penta 74GI. And if you're in part 1, you can look back. G stands for GM engine. I means it's fuel injected. Okay, and you can see this oil adapter right here. Both lines go direct into that device, okay, into that piece. So the oil filter, where it would be in a car, all the oil is leaving that and going back through that. It's not using the oil cooler plugs like a Chevy truck would use. Okay, and that's important. You know, this happens to be a Mercury Marine. Okay, this is 7.4, and you can see both lines and this aluminum adapter go right there. All right, and over here, since this is a high performance engine in a cigarette style boat, it has an oil temperature sender in one of those holes. Okay, so the hole closest to the adapter is out, the hole furthest away from the adapter is in. So they've got oil touching here for an oil temperature gauge. Okay, but it's not being used. I just use this as an example to show you that both these oil lines come out and go right up to the, well, first it goes to the oil cooler and then to the oil filter, then back into the engine. Gen 4, Gen 5, and 6. Obviously, if you're an engine builder, you understand the differences here. I just wanted to put this picture in there because I realize not everybody on here is an engine builder. Most of us, I'm sure, are, but just to give you an idea, when we talk Gen 4, there are no holes here. We don't have those oil cooler lines. Okay, so everything is forced to go through here. Okay, where in Gen 4, or excuse me, Gen 5 and 6, I have options. Like I say, the marine manufacturers seem to always use this pad on the traditional 7.4, 8.2, Gen 5, 6 stuff. We're gonna jump into 8.1. We're starting to see these a lot in our shop. Pretty good engine in my opinion. I know engine builders have mixed opinions, you know, because it's all metric, you know, it's not a traditional big block. But just a couple things. GM offered two engines. They offered a 375 horse and they offered a 420 horse base engine. This picture right here is the engine that Mercury Marine, Volvo Penta, Crusader, Marine Power were shipped, okay? And then they Marinized them. So I'm not reading all this to you. It was in GM production 01 to 09, but I will tell you Dart and other manufacturers are making aftermarket blocks. And Mercury, once in a while, you can still get one. I sold a brand new one last year, and it was $31,000 for a bobtail engine. It is not cheap, okay? They still get them every once in a while. They're brand new, or what they call a Quicksilver remanufactured product. It was complete from injectors to oil pan. It's a running engine without and by the way, that is without a transmission. So when I say the word bobtail, there's no transmission involved. Okay, and Quicksilver you can buy long blocks for $18,000. Okay, not exactly the cheapest thing in the world. So, but there's some running changes here, and I want to go over. And I'm going to show you what you can and can't do, in my opinion. Okay, there's some software changes in the computer. There's a couple different valve covers where the coils don't interchange. They went from a Delphi coil to a Mitsubishi coil, I believe. And they don't mount up, and the software on how those coils run in the computer is different, okay? And if I'm doing Swaptronics, I could have trouble, okay? This is not, you know, you go to the local you pull it yard, right? And we just take stuff out of the junkyard anymore. I think we all understand that, you know, newer stuff is very tricky. You know, this is not 1978 where you can just make anything run, you know? So I want to use this caution here when I'm ordering and building engines, all right? Because a couple things we got to know. First thing is, I always like to take the information that's available. Well, on most of these engines, as long as nobody screwed it up or it's not salt water, there's a sticker on the bottom of the engine, okay? And I figured this out over the years that you'll see a number and an XYXW and a number and an XAXF. Well, that means something. So if I see a 5XY, that means it's a 2005 375 horse base engine, all right? If I have a 7XA, I know that's a 2007 420 horse engine. And here's where the sticker is located. It's right in front of the oil pan. Okay. Again, if it's been rebuilt, salt water, you know, whatever, somebody spray painted, got a Chris Scheid paint job or something going on, the sticker's not going to be there. Okay. That's why I say it's not always there. But, you know, a lot of times as engine builders, right? Don't we get just a long block sometimes? And then we're supposed to be Nostradamus and figure out what it is, right? You know, nobody tells us anything. You know, we're just supposed to automatically know, oh, that's a 2003. Oh, that's a 2008. Oh, that's a 420 horse. These engines look identical, okay? I don't know if this is a 420 horse or a 370 horse, right? I'm going to show you how to figure that out. But, you know, as an engine builder, I got to know that, right? Because if we mix this up, we got problems, all right? I see this too much now. I see 420 long blocks on 370 horse ECUs and vice versa. It doesn't run right. It can fall plugs. It does all kinds of stuff. Can be tricky to diagnose. I've got some shortcuts and cheats that I'm going to give you, okay? 8.1 is very similar to the 7.4, okay? Priority main oiling system. These do use the vented plugs too. I probably should have put that picture in there. This is similar too, okay? This I stole out of a GM mechanical service manual, just showing the oil flow, how this line here, the return, does not intersect in an 8.1, okay? In the 7.4, this does intersect with this one, okay? It does not in an 8.1, right? So we got to know that, all right? It's just a little bit different than a 7.4. I'm not going to read this to you. I put this in the handout. You can read it. This is right out of a GM 8.1 mechanical service manual, and it's mostly to a car, right? It's talking about what this bypass here does and what happens if the oil filter is plugged and so forth. But we're going to cut to the chase, right? So this is a blown up picture if the oil cooler is plugged, okay? See, it would actually bypass here, all right? Which is kind of important, right? Because what if I have an oil filter plugged or something like that, because on all these 8.1 engines that I've seen, we are using at least one of these two ports. One of these two ports is getting used to go to the oil filter and the oil cooler. So if I have a restricted oil cooler or an oil filter problem or something like that, I want plan B to get oil to the engine, right? This is plan B, okay? Here's an 8.1 I got in the shop here not too long ago. This is Mercury's opinion, and that's why I want to cover the big three here, because all these marinization companies have an opinion on how to deal with this. All right, and when this engine comes in the shop, we may need to know what's going on. In fact, you should know, right? So what they do on this 8.1 engine, so you saw on the 7.4 that both oil lines went to this adapter, okay? Not on 8.1, all right, on Mercury. The oil's coming in here. This is the return. This is oil coming in. This is oil that would come out. That's blocked, okay? And this is oil coming out, right? So that's going to the oil filter, which is out of this picture. Then it goes to the oil cooler and then back into the engine block, all right? They do use both valves, and they're a different part number. I got that coming up, okay? But this just happens to show you, hey, this is plugged, this is not, because, right, a lot of us have teardown guys, okay? Maybe somebody doesn't pay attention, right? So if I don't pay attention that this is the return, okay, and the teardown guy rips all the plugs out of the block, and then here I am, or I'm worse yet, let's say I'm the installer, I'm doing the long block, right? And we're waiting for the marina or the mechanic in his backyard to do this, right? And he guesses wrong and puts, you see where I'm saying? This could be trouble, all right? So it's always a good idea to take pictures, but sometimes as engine builders, maybe the marina or whatever takes all these fittings out, and all I got is a hole here. And what is an engine builder? Naturally we plug all the holes. Okay, at least I know I do here. If I'm sending an engine block out that I don't know what's going on, I usually plug every single hole, because inevitably if I don't, the guy's going to start up, he's going to puke oil out somewhere, and guess what? I'm getting that ever since phone call, right? So this is important. But you can't see it in this picture, but there is a bypass valve in here. All right. This is a Mercury service manual. All right. And I stole this page out of here, and I just put this in here, and they're talking about the bypass valves. Okay. They basically say, hey, check them, make sure they're not full of debris and this and that. Well, I'm sure like you guys, we hot tank or we bake or we blast, those valves got to come out. They gotta, okay. And I got the GM numbers for you on what you need to know. But the trouble is the Mercury parts book, they don't mention these. The service manual touches on it, but the parts book is got amnesia. It's not in there, okay? This is the parts book out of an 8.1, all right? You can see this oil adapter, the two O-rings and this and that, but there's no mention or nothing on those bypass valves, okay? They don't tell you anything. It's in the service manual, but you can't order them. So that's why we get confusion on this. The service manual talks about it, but if I use Mercury's parts book, there's nothing in there, so. This is an 8.1 Volvo Penta. Look at this. They got this aluminum cover here, all right? It's different than the Mercury, and they are using both oil lines. And believe it or not, this oil line here is already obsolete. I just did this engine last year, and I always like to change these oil lines. This thing actually had a cracked block. It was froze, all right? It was out of a Glastron, I think it was, and it doesn't matter. Anyway, this thing had milky oil, so I want to throw this cooler away, and I want these oil lines. Well, look, it's got those Jiffy tight connectors. Remember, if you're a car mechanic back in the 90s, they had those Jiffy tight oil connectors on the radiators. That's what this is. So what I've been doing is, since we have hydraulic hose here, Gates brand, is I'm normally taking these fittings out. That's pipe thread, obviously, and I just go ahead and I take 3/8 pipe and I just put regular SAE fittings in there, you know, with a 45-degree taper or 37.5 or whatever. And I'm making my own lines here because I can't get this quick disconnect thing anymore. But anyway, Volvo Penta's opinion. This is the same engine that was sent out of North Tonawanda, New York, right? And the GM factory made this engine. I just showed you what Mercury does. Mercury has one line out of here, and they use the return here. Volvo Penta uses both, and they block this. All right. So here's Volvo Penta's parts book. Volvo Penta says, hey, Chris, hey, we show one bypass valve, all right? And here's the GM number, all right? Right there's the GM number for the 8.1 bypass valve. And they just use it in location number 4, all right? Location number 4 is right here. I'm not gonna scroll all the way back, all right? It just goes up into here, all right? I'm gonna talk about why here in a second. And here's this engine, right? I pop that valve out. It's just right there, all right? It does not have one here, all right? It does not, it's wide open. If you put one there, is it the end of the world? No, just not going to do anything, right? Because this is why this thing's blocked off, right? So there's an O-ring here, right? And this thing just screws up. So this oil is not going anywhere. So once the engine starts up and builds oil pressure, that oil just sits there, right? It's forcing everything through these 2 lines. That's all it's doing. That's all it's doing. This is the out, this is the in, all right? But we're not done. This is Crusader, all right? So Crusader has another way of handling this, all right? It's kind of similar, but they have this thing that looks like an oil filter, but it's got this ugly sticker on it that says, what? Do not remove. And when you look at this engine, it looks like a mini oil filter, like a 57099 Wix. That's what the cars take and a lot of the boats. It looks just like that. They also use the 2 lines here, okay? Similar to Volvo Penta, basically. No, I want to make this mention. Oil coolers. It's always a best practice. We get questions on this once in a while. Hey, Chris, which way should I plumb the oil cooler? Okay, which way should I have the oil coming in and out? And in Chris's opinion, is the oil should always go against the water flow. So this arrow right here, the water is flowing through this. I want the oil to flow against it. I think it does a better job. And from what I've read and researched, not every engine is plumbed this way, but I think that's a best practice that the oil is flowing against the water flow. I think it does a better job of cooling the oil, okay? And that goes for transmission coolers, engine oil coolers, or whatever. So I just want to make that comment, okay? But anyway, let's keep going here. So right here, this is a brand new 2005 engine that we put in a boat here not too long ago. It's a new old stock engine, so I know nobody's had their hands on it, okay? And you can see right there, it looks enticing. It looks like you want to take your oil filter wrench there and just start taking that thing right off, okay? But it's got this nice lovely yellow sticker that says, don't do that. Don't do that, Chris, right? And same thing, we're using those oil lines, okay? This is the out, this is the in. This is oil back into the engine, this is out. But I know what you're thinking to yourself, Chris, what the hell is in here? All right, and this is the part number of this thing. It's an RO 79065 in Crusader, okay? So this is what this piece is. Now, when I've overhauled these, I do change them. You probably could wash it out when I show you what's really inside, which is absolutely nothing, okay? This is right here on my kitchen table at home, and you can see there's absolutely no element in this thing. And if I took a wire, you'll see that I could go anywhere I want. So basically what this thing is a holding tank. That's all it is. It's not doing anything. So again, different opinion on how to handle it, okay? Crusader, Volvo, you see where I'm going with this. This is this a little bit of pain for us as engine builders, okay? But it's basically a can, okay? That's all it's doing. And here's that valve, 2501 3765, okay? I'm not sure what pressure this opens up at. I did some research, I couldn't figure it out. But I keep these in stock. I get them from my friendly GM dealer. And I will tell you that the 8.1, every 8.1 that I've taken apart has always had both valves in both locations, except Volvo Penta. Okay, Volvo Penta only uses the one. I should clarify that. Probably should have made a slide on that. I apologize. But Volvo-Penta, I always see this one, but I normally see one here too on everybody except Volvo-Penta. Do I think it matters? No. All right, I don't. But one thing this valve does here, which I think this is important, is this will force the oil to go through here, right? Because there's a chance without that valve, that with that holding tank thing, that I could have some unfiltered oil, okay? Because I would have unfiltered oil goes right in the engine, because we both know that oil is going through that hole. So this one I think is more important. This is just in case there's a restriction in the filter. Well, obviously there's not a filter there. It's just a, so. But again, if I put one in there, is it the end of the world? No, it's just not going to do anything. And I also want to make something else about these valves. These are pressure differential valves. Oops, I'm sorry. Sorry to jump around there. This is a pressure differential valve. So what does that mean? What that means is this thing's not going to open unless the pressure on this side is lower than that calibrated spring pressure. So for instance, the only way this thing's going to open is if I have, let's say I have 40 pounds of oil pressure, okay, and this is a 30 PSI valve. That's an assumption. I don't know what the valve is. Well, that thing's going to be open. Well, if I have higher pressure here, that valve's not going to open. Or conversely, if there's nothing here, and excuse me, nothing here, and there's over 30 PSI here, assuming that's a 30, that's going to open and dump in. So if the pressure is the same on both sides, this valve's just along for the ride. He's not doing anything, okay? That's what I'm saying. If you're not sure, you can put valves in. All you're going to do is force oil around more hole or more turns, which, like I say, they claim can reduce oil pressure at idle. Is it the end of the world? I don't think it is. Okay. I hope I cleared up some confusion on some of these valves. 8.1 uses a 24X reluctor. Okay, even in the newer engines, they never were like the LS where they went to the 58 or 60 -2. They always use this like the early LS 24X reluctor. All right. These timing covers. Okay, this is a headache. All right. We have 01 to 03. All right, which has a shorter cam sensor with the shorter timing cover. And then we have the 04 to current, all right, which has a raised timing cover and a raised sensor, all right. Now I know we've got these gears here. In my experience, these gears interchange as far as it'll pick it up, right? If I use this gear, as long as I've got the right cover and the right cam sensor for the cover, I'll have a cam signal. The worst case scenario here is I don't have a cam signal. If I don't have a cam signal, yes, the engine will start, except in Volvo-Penta on an EGC engine, okay, which is 06 and up. MIFI engines 05 and back will start. 06 and up EGC engines need both the cam and crank signal to start. So if I have a bad day and I mix this up on an 0781 GI, I'm going to be in tennis shoe mode. It ain't going to start, okay? But if it's a Mercury or Crusader or a Marine Power, the engine will start. I'll have an alarm and I'll have a code 81. All right, cam signal. But here's what I do here. If you're not sure, you can always, in my opinion, you can always put an 04 and up cover on. All right. And the reason I know this is what Mercury Marine's been doing on their replacement engines. All right, is they're making everything 04 and up. So if I put this 04 and up engine on an 01 to 03 wiring harness or computer, what I really need is I need this cam sensor connector. Okay, the cam sensor connector is a little bit different. It's got a little pin or this little latch here. So this happens to be standard ignition. It's an S656. You can Google this. You can go to Napa or any other normal parts store. They can order this for you. So basically, if I'm an engine builder and I want to make 181, we didn't get to the cam differences yet, but basically I'm just talking about timing covers. I could supply or tell the engine or the Marine or whoever to buy this connector and it'll work. Okay, it'll work. This is the coil differences. All right, this happens to be a Volvo-Penta picture because Volvo-Penta did not paint the early generation valve covers. Okay, so 01 to 03 or almost early 04, they had the Delphi coil, all right, and a black valve cover. The later mid 04 uses this Mitsubishi coil, and the bolt pattern is different. This coil will not bolt on this and vice versa. All right, so the problem here is if I'm shipping motors out and I've got these valve covers on, right, and maybe it's got coils, if I mix these up and all this stuff plugs in, this wiring harness, that 4-wire plug is exactly the same as this. So all this stuff is plug and play. But if I got an engine that doesn't want to run right, I may have a software issue, because what happened is Volvo Penta, I know this for a fact, Volvo Penta, when they had replacement long blocks in 04 and up, you actually had to update the software in an 01 to 03 ECU, because when they ship long blocks, they came with valve covers and coils on them, okay? So just to add to the confusion a little bit. But again, if I'm building engines or something like that, we're always the ones that get called, right? If this thing doesn't run right or it's beeping or something like that, even though we're not diagnosticians, 99% of us, you know, we're the ones getting called. Hey, what'd you do, right? Because it's the ever since, right? Ever since this, ever since that, you know, we get blamed. So that's why I want you to download this book or email Amanda and get this book and have it. You know, this is good reference information, trust me. So Crusader, same thing, right? This is a Crusader parts book. They show, hey, Chris, 6 and 6A, you know, same thing. Mercury does the same thing. This was a GM change, and the marine industry had to adapt to it. I just want you to be aware of this, okay? So here's the replacement mistakes that I see, okay? 420 horse long block on a 370. How do I know, right? How do I know what engine I had? How do I know what engine I'm giving or whatever, okay? Well, Chris's opinion, I realize not everybody's a scan tool guy here, but this is how I figure it out, okay, is when the engine's all warmed up, I'm looking at the map PID, okay, manifold absolute pressure. And it's not going to run exactly correct if I've got it mixed matched. But long story short is if I've got an 11 to 13 PSI map pressure, I probably have a 370 horse cam in there, okay. If it's a 420 engine, all right, the big difference is the cam, which I'm going to get to in a second. I'm going to have about a 9 PSI at idle, all right? So that's the first thing I do. When I go to these boats and I think somebody ordered the wrong engine from an engine rebuilder or something like that, right? Who gets called? The engine builder gets blamed, right? Hey, you sold me an engine, it don't work right, right? Well, the guy doesn't know what he's got and he's ordering stuff and it's 11 o'clock at night, or you know what I mean? Nobody pays attention, or they want 420. They think, oh, you know what? We're gonna put that 420 horse in. That's gonna really make that boat warm. You know, it's gonna wake up. So we want more power. Everybody's more power. So maybe they order this 420 long block. It's gonna foul plugs and everything else because that engine is operating at a map range that it wasn't programmed because the calibration is different. Okay. So again, I'll get that code 81. I told you about these coil differences. This is very important. Okay, very important. But like I say, maybe not all of us are scan guys, but you know what? Maybe if I do an engine for a marina and they call me up and say, hey, this thing ain't doing right, I want you guys to have some information because you can ask questions to the installer and say, hey, listen, tell me what that map pit is at idle. Okay, because I'll guarantee you the marina won't know this. Okay, so this is just from my experience, right? This is just from me working on these things. I've got scan tool recordings of these. You know, it's very important because I always say this: if I don't know what good is, how do I know what bad is? All right, very important when you diagnose stuff. So here's the meat and potatoes, right? So this is the big difference. All right, a 375 horse engine has a 5075 last four of the cam. Okay, this is the GM number here, 1256 5075. I put the Mercury Marine part number in there, and I put the Volvo Penta part number for a 370 cam. Here's the 420 cam. Okay, a lot more duration. I got specs coming up, but 8912. All right, and here's the Volvo Penta and the Mercury Marine number. Okay, and if you paid attention or if you saw the stuff in part one, I showed you that nomenclature is everything. Remember when I said Volvo Penta 81GXI, and then there was GI, X is the high performance. If I have an 8.1GX as an X-ray I know I'm dealing with a 420 engine, okay? I know a lot of us engine builders, we get long blocks in, right? All the stuff's stripped off. We don't necessarily know. There is a tag, like I say, if you go back up in this book, there's a tag there on Volvo that'll tell you that. In Mercury Marine, it's MAG or Magnum, HO. If I see 496 MAG HO, it's this guy, it's the big dog, okay? If I just see 496 Horizon or 8.1 S Horizon, it's 375. That's what I'm dealing with, okay? And again, it's very easy to get this mixed up, you know, but these are factory numbers here, okay? These are engines that I personally tore apart and recorded what the cams were, all right? So here's the specs. I'm not gonna read them off to you, it's in the sheet, but basically a lot more duration, a little bit more lift, is basically the biggest difference between these. Okay. You'll laugh. I use this in our diagnostic classes because this is a slide out of our diagnostic class, because as diagnosticians, I want to coach our marine technicians how to catch this. Okay. Because what happens is when somebody's got the wrong long block installed, they're jamming computers, they're jamming spark plugs, they're changing fuel fillers, they're running on a separate tank of gas, right? Because they don't think it's the engine, because the engine's brand new, right? You know what new stands for? Never ever worked. Okay. So this is how I know what I got. Well, unless I knock that cam plug out and it's got the factory cam, how do I figure it out? That's why I use that map PID. Okay. That's my fail safe. That's the first thing I'm looking at. Okay. Because taking the cam out of the engine or pulling the engine out of the boat and popping that plug. And what if somebody's got an aftermarket cam in it, right? Let's say it doesn't have those numbers in there. How do I know what's in there? Unless I got a cam doctor. Okay. I personally don't know one, but I know people that do. And I had a friend of mine run this on his cam doctor, right? There was a cam that I wasn't sure when it was this 5075 on a 370 horse, okay, 375. And I had it ran, and it's exactly what I listed. I'm not reading these numbers off to you, but basically I put it on, I had a shop friend of mine put it on a cam doctor, and he verified it for me. These are the special tools for 8.1. Now, back when all the GM dealers got screwed up in like 2008 or 9, I was an eBay freaking genius, right? So what I did is I started buying this stuff because there were Chevy dealers closing, nobody wanted this stuff. And an 8.1 in a GM dealer is not a popular engine. I mean, think about it. Somebody's got a Chevy, 3,500 truck. Do they want something that gets 8 miles a gallon, or they want the Duramax? So most of those trucks got the Duramax. There's very few 8.1 trucks, in my opinion. So a lot of these 8.1 tools are completely collecting dust. But in the marine world, at least where I'm at, 8.1's a very popular engine. Okay. So if you're bored, go to eBay and Google and see if you can't buy one of these things cheap. J44-900. This is the Kent Moore factory service tools. They're great. It comes with the rear seal installer, the rear seal puller, comes with a tool to hold the flywheel, to torque the harmonic balancer. It's got the installer. This is a great kit. And I'm bringing this up for a special reason. Because this, all right, we had someone, all right, that thought he was going to do his own rear main seal job, right? Well, this rear main seal on an 8.1 is like that modern style that has a wear sleeve, basically. It's got an inner ring that presses onto the crank. Well, this is not a typical Gen 5, Gen 6 rear seal that we take 2 screwdrivers and pry out of there, okay? Or unbolt, Gen 5, you don't unbolt the cap, right? Because that's normally what I do. I take the rear cap off and I take my finger and I walk that rear seal right out of there. But what this guy did is he took a hammer and chisel, and look what he did. He knocked one of the teeth off the reluctor wheel, right? So that's donezo. You start this up, if it runs, I don't know. I'm definitely going to have a crankshaft sensor issue here. Wouldn't you agree? So it's because he went too fast and he didn't get the right tools. Now, can you take this thing off without the special tools? Yes, you can. You can. I'm not saying you absolutely have to have it, but I just want to point this out because this cost this guy an engine. Okay, because to my knowledge, if there is, please comment. I'm not aware of an indexing tool like for the LS engines. I know Goodson shows an indexing tool for the reluctor wheels on LS crankshafts. I have not seen an indexing tool for an 8.1. If there's one out there, please let me know. I'd like to own one. So comment, email me, whatever. All right. So basically the same thing, just a better picture of that tooth. All right, we're done with 8.1s. I'm going to jump into Mercury's own engine. All right, what this is the 8.2, and this is not a completely traditional 502. I've only had one of these in our shop so far, and it came in for low oil pressure, and the relief valve was stuck in the pump. It was a typical M77 style oil pump. But anyway, this engine came out in 2010. So in 2009, GM says we're done with 8.1s. Okay. Crusader and Volvo, they bought some extras. There's boats that are 2010, 11 that still had some 8.1s, kind of like the 7.4 thing. You could get 2000, 2001 boats that had 7.4 liters, the Vin J, like the 310 horse. But technically, GM was done in production. Those were just leftover engines. All right. But anyway, Mercury says, you know what? We need a big block. We still have Mercury owns Sea Ray, Brunswick Corporation. They still have, some pretty good sized boats out there. So they went ahead and developed their own 8.2. All right. And here's what I know about them. I don't know everything about these, but I will tell you this. It does have a special Molle supplied piston. All right. Again, I have not overhauled one, but I do know that they're Molle custom pistons. And the ones I've seen are GM Performance Parts 502 blocks. Okay, it's the 4-inch 466 bore. We'll get to that in a second. And it says GM all over it, but it's got Mercury's own aluminum heads, their own cam profile. And believe it or not, between the HO, which is the big dog, and the non-HO, the camshafts are the same. So it appears to me that just the software is different between the two big horsepower changes. Whereas 8.1, the camshaft was different and has a forged crank. I don't know if I mentioned that before. The 8.1 had a forged crank. This thing had a forged crank too. Nice looking engine inside. When I had the pan off, this thing was pretty built really nice. And I've been on boats. These things run, they run well. Okay, they really do. Here's a quick spec. I'm not reading all this to you, but basically it's 8 3/4 compression. They're saying the back two cylinders have a little bit more bore size. I haven't had one apart yet to verify if that's true or false. I'm just putting this out there for you. But it is basically a GM Performance Parts block, at least the ones I've seen. Okay. Here's the horsepower differences, 380 to 430. Again, I looked in the parts book. I had serial numbers for HOs. I had serial numbers for regulars. I looked in Mercury parts book, and the camshaft part number is identical. So I don't believe the camshaft is different in these engines. I believe it's all software. Okay, because I've been doing some research on this stuff, and like I say, I haven't seen the cams look the same. But the interesting part here is, and we're going to talk about this if we get to it, is when we do a sea trial. And you can see, look, they have serial number breakpoints, okay, on what they want for RPM, you know. So 4,400 to 4,800 on the little guy. And then if the serial number is this and above, they want it 46 to 5. Okay, I don't know what's different, you know, but Mercury has an opinion about that, and we need to follow that. And when we get to the sea trial section, I'll explain a little bit more about all this. This is one of the engines we had here in the shop. Okay, this came in because it lost oil pressure and the relief valve was stuck in the pump. Luckily, a guy caught it in time. When the engine got warm, when he went into, we have some islands around where I live here on Put-in Bay and Kelly's Island. It's about an 8-mile run. He'd take an 8-mile run. This happened to be I think it was a 2016 Formula, like a 34 PC. Nice boat. Okay, IO Twin Bravo 3s, I believe. But anyway, he'd take this thing out and he'd pull back, and the alarm went off, and it came up right on his Mercury vessel view, low oil pressure. So the customer was smart. He turned the key off. We took it to a dealer that we do a bunch of work for. They pulled the engine, and it only had like not even a couple hundred hours on it. And that's when I found that old relief valve that was stuck. All right, and I just put a new oil pump in it. It's fine. It's 2 years ago. It's been running fine. But while I had this engine here, I did a ton of research, you know, because that's one thing I like to do. When I get a new platform in here, I spend time with it, right? Because I want to know. If I don't know what good is, how do I know what bad is? But this is basically all Mercury stuff. Okay. Now this C-core, that is a term Mercury uses for like inferior components, you know, better components, stainless steel and stuff like that. It's got nothing to do with the internals of the engine. Okay, so it's a marketing term. And it says EC, emission control. Well, that's because it's got catalytic converters. All right. And this is the MAG HO. You know, remember I said before, we always want to pay attention to nomenclature. HO. I understand most of our machine shop folks out there, we're probably not getting an engine dressed like this. This is the way I like to see them. I want everything. I run these things, you know, and so forth. I realize not everybody is a marina and has a scan tool and all that stuff, but I want to go over that because sometimes, you know, we need to work together with our installer, whether it's a marina or a general customer. All right. So like I say, a lot of times machine shops, we get blamed for stuff, you know, but if we're armed with questions, you know, it's better for us. You know, we can come up with a solution. So I'm always interested in this sticker, and it tells me, hey, Chris, 8.2 MAG HO right next to the throttle body. This baby's prop 46 to 5,000. Okay. I'm always interested in that. All right. This is a catalytic converter. All right. This engine was tight to get out of this boat, so the marina that took it out had to take the elbows off. And I will tell you one thing, this exhaust manifold is heavy. I mean, it's chiropractor heavy, because I'm telling you what, it's a chiropractor visit taking these things on and off the boat. I feel sorry for the marine technicians, because I've done these cat motors, and I'm telling you that this is all cast iron, but this substrate's in here. All right. So we're not throwing this whole manifold in the freaking oven, if you know what I'm saying. All right. I'll go back to this picture here with this manifold. See with this cat, look how big that is. You know, these things are warm. You know, catalytic converter's got to be 600-700 degrees to light off, right? So we got a bunch of water going through. We got sensors in here that set off alarms. There's an oxygen sensor right there. Okay, there's the pre-cat oxygen sensor right here. This thing is heavy. It's every bit of over 100 pounds. Okay. So one other thing with this, it has a unique trigger wheel. All right. Now, if you look in the GM Performance Parts book, they show an option with aluminum timing cover and a 58X cam trigger, and I can't remember what the excuse me, a 58X crank trigger, and I think they had like a 4X cam trigger, and I'm going off memory here. But Mercury doesn't use that. Mercury uses their own trigger. They've got this trigger here that's 24X. All right. This is the timing gear. All right. And you can see this thing's got a lip on it. And they're telling me, hey, Chris, right? This lip needs to go here. Now, why do you think they're telling me that? Because this thing with a keyway, look, I've got different width teeth. If I 180 this thing and put it on that way, right? Let's say the teardown guy, not to pick on them, but they're fun to pick on. If the teardown guy rips this motor apart, right? Zip, 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 he's NASCARing it apart, and he throws this in a bucket. Now I'm the builder. Now I got a 50-50 shot on getting this right. Agreed? Okay. So I put the slide in here because I know not everybody's got access to this. But I can almost bet if we 180'd that thing, I'm going to have ignition timing that's going to be either advanced or retarded. So I'm waiting for that day till that happens. I'm sure it'll happen. I hope it doesn't happen to anybody that's on this webinar or watching this. It's very important. Okay. But that's why I put this in here. This is Mercury's own deal. It's their own computer. These engines use waste spark, like from 1988. It's eerily similar to a Buick Grand National or a frickin' 3.8 Series 2 or something like that. It has 4 coil packs buried on the rear of the engine, and the companion cylinders are wired together. So they don't have individual coils. Kind of a pain. Okay, Mercury loves waste spark. It's like I say, from 1980, whatever. All right. But I just want to give you these things here because I put this in here because I'm thinking this is something a machine shop could really screw up, right? And we put this thing in, it doesn't run right, and nobody knows. And this would probably not send any codes, and it would be very difficult to diagnose without known good. Okay. I do have known good scope patterns on how this looks for this reason, you know. Well, we're done with GM, so let's jump into Chrysler.